What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. I'm your host, Manny Maradiaga, here on a Wednesday, January 29th, getting closer to the end of the month. We got the Pro Bowl coming up this weekend, but getting closer and closer to the ever-waning Super Bowl, right? That is coming up in the month of February, right? It feels like an eternity until then, but for right now, we are going to continue to talk about some things related to the NFL as we build up more and more towards the big game. And on today's show, we're going to go over a lot of things being related to head coaches, right? We're going to talk about Mike McCarthy and his decision to actually not coach this upcoming season. Also, down in Jacksonville, Liam Cohen talked a little bit during his press conference about Trevor Lawrence and how he's planning and just a big outlook on the overall offense as a whole. And as well, we're going to talk a little bit about some quarterbacks here, Aaron Rodgers and Russell Wilson. A lot of uncertainties with their future, and we're going to try and clear some things up on today's show. So make sure to stick around for all those topics and more as we go along through today's episode. But before we get started, I'd like to remind you guys, as I always do, if you guys have any questions, comments, or opinions you'd like to share during these live shows, please don't hesitate to do so. Any input, any insight, or anything like that adds a different perspective to the show and just also makes it a lot more interactive and entertaining, I believe. So if you guys are able to do that and want to let your thoughts be heard, there's an easy way to do that now just by using the Super Chat feature. You can use the Super Chat feature by clicking the $ at the bottom of the chat box to send in your Super Chat. In this way, it makes it absolutely sure that I could see your question, comment, or opinion, read it out loud, and get a sense for what you guys are thinking during whatever topic we have coming up on today's show. So go ahead, let us know what you're thinking, hit the Super Chat button, and let's keep this show as interactive and as exciting as possible. Again, use the Super Chat feature, click the $ to add a little bit something to these shows, and just let us know what's on your mind. So, with that now out of the way, we can start talking about the first piece of head coaching news, this time regarding Mike McCarthy. And no, we're not making an announcement or we're not reacting to him getting a new job, but rather NFL media reporting that Mike McCarthy will not be coaching in 2025. He informed the Saints that he was removing his name from consideration and he would rather opt out of this year and just wait until 2026, essentially, to get back into the swing of things. And if you guys aren't aware, the Saints are the last team to still not hire a head coach up until this point, and we spoke how it was going to be down to probably Kellen Moore, Kingsbury, Cliff Kingsbury potentially, and Mike McCarthy, it seemed like. But now that Mike McCarthy has taken his name out of the running, and I saw today also that Cliff Kingsbury has also said, thanks, but no thanks, I'm going to stay in Washington. Now it seems that it is all down to Kellen Moore, potentially. But we're going to talk a little bit more about that later in the show. But for right now, Mike McCarthy starting off with the Cowboys, in this hiring cycle, he was still technically under contract there with the Cowboys. So the fact that they didn't agree on an extension and now Mike McCarthy will have to wait until the next coaching cycle to see what kind of jobs are out there. And, it could be some better opportunities, you could say. You never know what's going to happen in the NFL with these coaches and potentially during the season as well, right? He could just be waiting and then out of nowhere get a phone call about a great opportunity and he could take it. So this, for now, is going to be something that I won't say is completely ruled out, but for right now, it just seems like Mike McCarthy is willing to kind of step away for a little bit and kind of regroup and try and, maybe improve on some things or whatnot. And it's actually not that different from what he did the last time, he was making a switch from team to team. It was back in 2018 when he was leaving Green Bay, and he actually didn't coach in 2019 until he landed with the Dallas Cowboys the year after that. But The only difference is now this time around he's actually not going to get paid, because back in 2018 the Packers had a buyout, or he had a buyout in his contract, so the Packers actually paid him for them to move on. They wanted to move on, so they paid that buyout clause. But this time, Mike McCarthy is just out of a contract, so he might have something else lined up this year that he's willing to try out, something football related or not. He's going to, I'm sure, keep busy during this time. But it is still a little bit of a surprise to me, because I thought that, I don't know, I guess it is just his decision, but I still thought that there would be an opportunity out there for him. And the Saints, could have been that opportunity, but he said no. But I'm also not completely ruling out the fact that they probably maybe gave him a little bit of a hint or a tell that they were favoring Kellen Moore, and they were ideally trying to target him. So maybe once he heard that, he said, all right, I'm just going to remove myself from the consideration. I think that's also a possibility. But, for a guy that has a record of 174, 12, and 2, I was a bit surprised overall with the decision, overall for Mike McCarthy. But I understand it, I guess, because he did join a little bit late. I believe by the time he decided, it was announced, it was official that him and the Cowboys weren't going to agree to a contract extension. It felt a little late, because I believe Mike Vrabel was already the head coach of the Patriots by then. I think that was already announced, and it felt like a bunch of teams already got a jump on their ideal candidates, and there was still a lot of uncertainty with Mike McCarthy, right? Whether or not he was actually going to be available or the Cowboys were going to extend him. I thought that was also a little bit of, not a good look. I thought, because, we talked about the Cowboys rejecting the Bears' offer to interview Mike McCarthy, and they did interview him eventually, but I think holding off as long as they did and keeping every other team at like a 50%, 40%, not really wanting to pursue that much, I thought that hurt his chances a little bit compared to other guys that you knew were going to be available to become a head coach. And, we talked about our displeasures with that, right? If you're the Cowboys, and they were close, they were close to a contract extension. What they didn't agree on was the length of that extension. But, if you were going to wait that long, you're probably leaning towards not extending him anyway. So I didn't really see the reasoning behind, rejecting the Bears' offer, right? If you're already, holding out to the last day, why not let him interview at that point in time, right? I thought that was kind of a bad look for the Cowboys, but I'm not saying that's the main reason, but it is just something that was brought to my, attention when I was looking at this, reading over some stuff about Mike McCarthy and things like that. So, overall, the opportunities will be there, but I think everybody pretty much has, set in stone what they wanted in a head coach. Everyone's already got their spot filled up for the most part. It's just the Saints that are left, and it seems like they have a favorite as well to this point. But, I think also, just briefly here, with this whole situation, as I look around the entire coaching landscape and how Ben Johnson started the chain reaction and how everything happened pretty quickly after that, right? Because it was in the same week that Ben Johnson got hired, and then Aaron Glenn got hired as well, and then it was followed up by Liam Cohen and then Pete Carroll and, guys like that. So it all happened pretty fast, and I did mention, the idea of the Cowboys kind of waiting too long. But also, if you're Mike McCarthy, I think there's also a bit of me that's thinking, if I was Mike McCarthy and this team, the Cowboys, was holding out to the last second to try and get a last-minute contract extension done with me, I would feel some sort of way like I don't really want to talk about an extension with just you guys, right? So I felt like that would have rubbed me the wrong way, and maybe if I was Mike McCarthy, I would have tried a little bit harder or done a little bit more to try and get some other interviews in quicker than they eventually did. Again, I don't want to say that's the main reason, but I felt like both parties, McCarthy and the Cowboys, were pretty passive in this entire extension talk. So what's ironic about that too also is that I like all the other head coaching moves, and the only one that I would rather have Mike McCarthy in, ironically, than the coach that was hired is the Dallas Cowboys. And, we've talked ad nauseum about that and the decision by the Cowboys to just go with Brian Schottenheimer, but that will be, discussed a little bit further along in the show. So we're not going to get into all of that yet. We're going to save that for later in the show. But for right now, Mike McCarthy has made the decision. He's not going to be coaching this year, and I'm sure we're going to see him somewhere, probably like on ESPN or, some of these shows. Imagine if he had a podcast. That would be that would not surprise me, honestly. Barring, his age and things like that. Nothing really surprises me now. Everybody's got their own podcast. So whatever Mike McCarthy decides to do during his time off, I'm sure it's going to draw a lot of eyes to it anyway. So for right now, we're going to leave that topic there, and we're going to move on to discussing some quarterbacks here. Aaron Rodgers and Russell Wilson. Weirdly, in a very similar situation with each of their respective teams. They got a lot of similarities on how the season ended and a lot of uncertainties with their future going forward, right? We're going to try and decipher and kind of shuffle through all these question marks and answer some questions, whether or not only one of them is going to return to their teams, or are they going to be playing and be experiencing new environments in 2025? That segment is coming up right after this break.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign.
I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown, get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the noose it fits. I'm losing shit, a stupid myth. You choose to live or choose to dip. You choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
Thank you for joining me back here on the Chip Shot Football Podcast. In the previous segment, if you're just joining us now, we discussed the recent news that Mike McCarthy was not going to be coaching in 2025, rather taking a back seat and just waiting for the next coaching cycle to really have a proper go at it for his new team. So now in the second segment, we're going to get into some more quarterback discussions, right? We got two veteran quarterbacks with uncertain futures about a month away from free agency, Russell Wilson and Aaron Rodgers. And one of them, we got a 36-year-old Russell Wilson who was on a one-year deal that is set to expire at the beginning of March. And on the other side, we got a 41-year-old Aaron Rodgers who could still be thinking about retiring, as one of his possible options, or he still has one more year left on his current deal with the New York Jets. And, he could just return to New York if both parties are willing to do that. Or again, if he still wants to play, there could be another divorce, so to say, in Aaron Rodgers' near future if they decide to go their separate ways. And then, it opens up a whole nother area of uncertainties and speculation and things like that. But for right now, where both Aaron Rodgers and Russell Wilson are, both are in very similar spots, right? Because you look at them in the season that they both had, and the excitement at the beginning of this Aaron Rodgers experience, right, only added when, unfortunately, he got hurt. He came back this year, and the excitement was there once again. He was a lot of people's, Super Bowl favorite, a lot of people's Super Bowl picks, just on the anticipation and the initial excitement. And the same thing could kind of be said about Russell Wilson, right? Because in a way, the anticipation was there. The rumors were starting to build up. Mike Tomlin ended up making the decision, and the first 6 games out of his first 7 games were spectacular. And the hope, the anticipation, the excitement also was built up at the start. But with how both of these quarterbacks ended their season this past season, all that excitement was quickly washed away and, brought us now to this point where we don't really know what to feel about either quarterback, right? If you're a Jets fan or a Steelers fan like me, you don't really know where to stand on both of these quarterbacks respectively because, some people I know, I'm sure, have their clear-cut thoughts that they don't want Russell Wilson or they don't want Aaron Rodgers to stay, or some like me that are like in the middle, like, yeah, we'll take him because, what's our other option, right? And I think that's where this conversation sort of shifts to, right? Because if you're in the Steelers and the Jets spot as of right now, there's a lot of question marks on this position, right? What do you do? Where do you go? Do you stick with the same, reliable veterans that are Aaron Rodgers and Russell Wilson? Are you going to settle in a way for those two options after you saw what you saw this past season? Or do you potentially explore other options, right? Is that something that you want to take the risk on, knowing that, the guys out there in free agency or maybe even the draft, depending on where you're selecting, might not give you that much more? So the Steelers and the Jets are in a very similar spot because while they might have very good players at certain positions, you're not really going to go that much further than where you have been without the quarterback position elevating the people around them, right? Being game changers rather than not game managers, but just your average quarterback that you can win a couple games, maybe 8, 9 wins during a season, 10 wins if you're the Steelers, and you're not really going to be taken seriously after then, because from that point on in the playoffs, obviously, the road gets very narrow, and along the way, the weaker competition falls, and it always seems to be the Steelers in one respect or the Jets that don't even get to the playoffs. So that's kind of where both teams stand as of right now. And I mean, you look at each one of these situations specifically, starting off with the Steelers, right? You crash out of the playoffs once again. And what's interesting about them is that they also have Justin Fields standing there as well. And their owner and president, Art Rooney II, said earlier this week that he preferred to sign Russell Wilson or Justin Fields, hinting and pretty much stating, honestly, pretty bluntly, that he doesn't want a repeat of last year. He doesn't want to have two quarterbacks because, when they say when you have two quarterbacks, you really don't have a quarterback at all because you're switching between both of them so much. Ideally, Art Rooney does not want to have that repeated, and now he's kind of backed the Steelers up into a corner, right? You're going to have to pick one of these quarterbacks rather than having just both of them come on, because it would be very easy to just say, let's just run it back and let's get better around them and give them a better shot. And I think that sort of reasoning and excuse, quite frankly, has run its course also. No one's really going to buy that anymore. So I like the fact that Art Rooney said that he preferred to sign one of them, and looking at both of them, I mean, you could tell that obviously Justin Fields is younger. He took a step forward from where you began with him to where he is right now. I would say he definitely got better just by being in a lot higher quality organization rather than where he used to be. And, he could be cheaper as well because Russell Wilson's probably going to require at least around 20 to 30 in per year on a contract, whether it be 2 years or 3 years or something like that. Justin Fields certainly would cost a lot less in that respect. And, Art Rooney also said and kind of hinted to the fact that he would like to continue working with Justin Fields as well. And that could be subject to change and how your feelings on a certain quarterback change. And of course, if Justin Fields has other options out there that are also intriguing to him, then the Steelers could want to keep him as much as they want, or they could still be 50-50 on it. But it won't matter because, you got other teams wanting to apply or inquire about his services. So it's not just up to the Steelers, right? So that's also a different factor that you got to work into this whole equation. So it really comes down to when you put it like that, like Art Rooney said, he wants to sign either Russell Wilson or Justin Fields. Ideally, you can kind of say that you don't. Can you say that you don't already know what Russell Wilson can give you? And if you already know what he's going to give you, is that something that you just want to run back again? Is that something that the fans are going to be happy with? Probably not. Is that something that you feel like you can improve upon, or have you already seen what Russell Wilson is as a quarterback and, we've reached the ceiling with him, ideally? That's kind of where I'm at with it. And also, on the Justin Fields side of things, right, how much more can he grow? And is it going to be enough for you to at least win a playoff game, right? Because if you go with Justin or if you go with Russ, the expectation is going to be the same. And the disappointment is going to be the same at the end of the year if they still can't get over that hurdle. So the quarterback situation as a whole for the Steelers is probably not going to get fixed this offseason, as a certain answer. But the last thing I think a lot of fans and a lot of people just following the Steelers want to see is this team run it back. So that puts Russ in a very peculiar situation. And then you go over to New York and they failed to meet expectations, obviously, when you're talking about Super Bowl and you're talking about winning the division and things like that. There was already issues in the offseason, if you guys remember, all the way back then, where Rodgers missed a mandatory practice, or he didn't, or it wasn't mandatory for him, or maybe it should have been. There was that whole confusing bit of it when we talked about it almost a year ago. But, you had certain issues like that. You have Aaron Rodgers preferring to run an offense that's familiar and that he's comfortable with rather than being open to potentially changing some things about it. That's what's been rumored and reported. The Jets they got him Devontae Adams also on this team, but that still really didn't improve things. And on top of everything else, he's got a very weird and cold relationship with the ambassador, Woody Johnson. So, despite all those issues, right, fair or unfair, it does come down to the performances. And in terms of performance, Aaron Rodgers' stats weren't that bad, to be honest. But as a 42-year-old, can you rely on him to come back, be older towards the end of next season, and think that you're going to get that much better? And is he even going to be open to, some of the new ideas that you're coming in here with Aaron Glenn, and Aaron Glenn trying to establish a culture? Is he going to butt heads with Aaron Rodgers and things like that, right? These are things that pop up, especially when you have a new head coach coming in, because the Steelers, you know what they're going to get with Mike Tomlin, and it looks like they're going to keep all their coordinators, so you know what you're going to get there. But when you have a new brass of leadership coming in, new ideas, new attitudes and characters and things like that, that might not always go over very smoothly. So that is the uniqueness of that situation. And again, I just can't get over the fact that, are you going to be okay with going out and getting a Sam Darnold, right? Is he going to do the trick? Is he really going to elevate either of these teams that much more for a higher price? I would say probably not. And then if you look at the draft, right, it's not been labeled as the best quarterback draft in recent years. And the Steelers have already been here when they drafted Kenny Pickett just for the sake of drafting a quarterback. Everybody in the draft process and things like that would have said that class wasn't necessarily the strongest, but the Steelers, regardless of that, drafted a quarterback, and now he's a backup, all about to win potentially a Super Bowl ring before the organization that drafted him, right? The irony. So, you have something like that happening, and, if you're not going to get both of the top guys like Cam Ward or Shedeur Sanders, is that something that you want to rely upon as potentially a first option? Again, probably not. So, could they both be bridge quarterbacks, right? Could you bring them back in a way where you say to them, all right, well, you might not be the starter, but you could be the temporary, just bridge guy that helps us transition into something else. We're not going to guarantee you anything long-term Are they going to be open to that? Is Aaron Rodgers going to be willing to do that? Same thing with Russell Wilson, where, again, he could be interested in other opportunities like Las Vegas, right, with his former head coach there in Pete Carroll. That could be something that intrigues him, that ends up pulling him away from Pittsburgh. That could be a possibility. And, I mean, I'm just kind of like spitballing here with some of these options. It's a weird situation, right? And in terms of, who is most likely to stay, right, when you're talking about so many similarities, I would probably say, if I had to choose which one's likely to stay with their same team, I would probably say Aaron Rodgers, just because it's like really the only option for the Jets, and I don't think they're going to go out and pay somebody else to come in, or they're going to hand the keys to some rookie or like a young quarterback like Jordan Travis that they have on their team already. I think the Jets are kind of cornered into a corner a little bit more, where the Steelers obviously have Fields if they want to do that, or they could, also get a free agent guy, but they don't have many more options. They just got one more than the Jets do. So that's why I feel like the Jets and Aaron Rodgers are more likely to end up back together rather than Russell Wilson and the Steelers. And can they give you something? Can they still provide something? Yes, but not to the expectation that I think both of these organizations are, crying out for, right? The Jets would love to make the playoffs, or at least be in the conversation, right? Stop with these losing records, right? They need to have that sort of improvement come next year, you'd hope. And then for the Steelers, right, the standard is at least being in the playoff conversation and trying to win a playoff game. So the standard's got to be that, and I'm not sure that these quarterbacks really meet it. That's why there's so much uncertainty. So that's where things stand as of right now. We'll see where they move along with these topics as we get closer to free agency. But for right now, going back to the head coaching cycle, we're going to talk about the Saints a little bit more in depth. It looks like they got their top target and they're zeroing in on him as the days move along. Who is that? Who are they going after most? And do we agree on it? What are our thoughts on the Saints' top head coaching option potentially in 2025? We'll reveal that when we return after this break.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube, absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.
Jumping back into the action here on the Chip Shot Football Podcast, and we're going to be jumping straight back into all the action around the head coaching positions. And I really should say head coaching position, just one, because the Saints are the only team still that hasn't hired a new head coach. The Jets got their guy, the Bears got their guy, the Jaguars got their guy after a little bit of a back and forth. So now focusing on the Saints, and going back to Monday this week, it appears that the Saints are zeroing in on their top candidate for their head coaching spot. And it started on Monday after the NFC Championship game, where word got around that the Saints would be willing to travel to Philadelphia as soon as Monday, 2 days ago, and interview Kellen Moore in person. They already had a virtual meeting with him the week before, I'm pretty sure, during the lead up into the NFC Championship game, and assuming that went well because of the reports. And then without really letting any time pass, the Saints got on a plane and traveled to Philadelphia and started talking with Kellen Moore about their head coaching position. And the story checks out because the Saints then announced on Tuesday morning that they completed their second interview with Kellen Moore. And according to ESPN's Jeremy Fowler, it seemed that the meeting went so well because he stated that it started on Monday night when, the Saints got there and they traveled over there, like I said. It started on Monday night and it concluded in the evening and early morning on Tuesday. And then you got the announcement from the Saints, obviously. So I don't know what you could be talking about for that long, first off. And then, if you're going to be talking for that long, I'm sure there's got to be some sort of chemistry, some sort of sense of being on the same page when it comes to, if you're Kellen Moore, presenting your ideas, your identity, what you would ideally be as a head coach. And the Saints, for them to talk for you for that long, right, they must have hit it off, right? It must have been a pretty riveting conversation, right, for it to go that long. But it wasn't only ESPN that reported it, but also Fox Sports' Jordan Schultz referred to Kellen Moore as the leader in the clubhouse. Also from ESPN as well, Adam Schefter said that Kellen Moore is a lead candidate to take that job, and Mike Garafolo, another NFL insider from NFL Media, said that Kellen Moore remains the most likely candidate to take the Saints head coaching job. So all that being said, the Saints still can't hire him for as much as they, probably love talking to him, for as much as, all these guys say that it's probably going to be Kellen Moore. The Saints still can't sign him because they got to wait until after the Super Bowl, right? They can't do anything in between. And for, I guess like tampering's sake and anything like that, the Saints got to wait. The Saints got to wait until after the Super Bowl to make any sort of announcement. But if it does happen, the Saints must be thinking, from what we saw this year with Kellen Moore and that offense in Philadelphia, right, with Saquon and all those guys, the Saints must be thinking, like, could you imagine what Kellen Moore could do with our great running back in Alvin Kamara, or what he could do with a young guy like Chris Olave, who, for me, feels like he's just about to have like a really impactful breakout year. I know he's had very good seasons, but with the Saints, not being as good, per se, I feel like we're on the cusp of seeing Chris Olave have a very impressive season, along with the Saints also having a unexpected, very competitive season. I feel like you could be close to that, and the Saints clearly feel that Kellen Moore brings them closer to that goal if he becomes their head coach. And doing some of the similar things that you had with Saquon in Philadelphia, you could probably do a good amount of them with Alvin Kamara, as great of a running back he is over in New Orleans. So that would be exciting. You have some exciting pieces there to work with, but it doesn't rule out all the other negatives and uncertainties, right, that come with every job. But I think this would definitely be more of a win for the Saints to get a guy like Kellen Moore, especially after the year he had this year. And for Philadelphia, after a historic season that was orchestrated by Kellen Moore, pretty much, it'd be unfortunate that they'd have to then find another new offensive coordinator, like it's become a tradition almost in Philadelphia, because if Kellen Moore does go and sign with the Saints, this would be the fifth offensive coordinator that would work with Jalen Hurts in his career so far. And not only you would have to find a new offensive coordinator, it would be kind of late in the process, right? And, some of the top guys could already be interviewing with different positions and things like that. They could already be hired by the time, after the Super Bowl. There's still a lot of time left. And, if you start looking after that, it could be a very short group that you got to pick from. So it would be less than ideal, obviously, because, like, say you got to look for a new offensive coordinator, and on top of that, you lose the Super Bowl, right? Then nobody's happy at all, right? That's the worst case scenario. But, this has oddly happened before for the Philadelphia Eagles, right? Because it's incredible how, if the Saints do end up hiring Kellen Moore, it would be the second time in 3 years that the Eagles have played a Super Bowl in a city where the home team ended up hiring one of their coordinators. And it seems like a very niche stat, but the last time that happened was in 2022 when the Eagles played in the Super Bowl against the Chiefs like they are this year in Arizona, and after that Super Bowl, Jonathan Gannon, their defensive coordinator, was hired by the Arizona Cardinals. Now, the same thing could be happening this year, but hopefully for the Eagles, they end up winning the Super Bowl at least, right? If they are going to part ways with Kellen Moore. And overall, while Philadelphia has been awesome, to their own respect, because of the enormous amount of talents that they have everywhere you look, right? It's some of the best players at those positions. But Kellen Moore certainly contributed to that, and you can tell, and you could really make the comparison from last year, where this team was virtually the exact same, and they had a different coordinator in Brian Johnson, and we all know how much of a mess it was last year with Sean Desai and Brian Johnson. Brian Johnson, getting fired halfway through the year, and then also there was some confusion or some contradicting reports saying that he wasn't really able to run his offense. Nick Sirianni wanted to run his offense, leading into some stories into this offseason where Nick Sirianni said he was going to take a step back. And then on the defensive side, it was arguably more confusing because you had Sean Desai up in the booth, then he came down onto the field, then they brought in Matt Patricia, then they switched over the play calling duties and things like that. It was all a huge mess, and with so much talent everywhere, you can see the importance of these coordinators, and the Eagles hit it out of the park, obviously, this year with Kellen Moore coming over and Vic Fangio. So they're not going to lose both guys like they did with Shane Steichen and Jonathan Gannon. Obviously, they could keep Vic Fangio if it ends up turning out that way, but losing a guy like Kellen Moore, I think, for all the talent that they have, is not something that you could just brush over, because we've seen it go very bad in a very recent, time over the last year or so. So that would be something that would be a pretty decent hurdle to get over. Again, especially starting so late. And going back to Jalen Hurts and how this would be the fifth coordinator for him in his NFL career, he actually mentioned that topic back in the spring, where he said he'd like to see some continuity at that spot after having guys like Press Taylor in 2020, Sean Steichen for 2 years, Brian Johnson last year, and then Kellen Moore now this year, right? And it seems like they could be moving on again, and that could be troubling because, it's ironic because one of the biggest problems that people bring up in these failed quarterback experiences or failed top-rated, top-drafted quarterbacks is that they switch the coordinators too much, or they switch the coaches too much, and the quarterback can't really develop because there's so much, just switching from year to year. And it's almost the same situation here with Jalen, but to their credit, they've done a fantastic job of still being relevant and still being competitive for the kind of team that guys like Howie Roseman have built for them. But ideally, you'd want to see your coordinator stick around. And I don't think it's any surprise that when Shane Steichen stuck around for more than just 1 year, that's when Jalen Hurts was arguably playing some of his best football in comparison to right now. It looks different, but still, Jalen Hurts is playing some of the best ball. And, if I was an Eagles fan, I would love to see Kellen Moore stay, but it feels like the Saints have put all their chips to the middle of the table to try and sign Kellen Moore. So I expect this move to happen, and then we'll see where the Eagles go from there. But I would like to see the move. I think the move would benefit the Saints more than it would Kellen Moore, because I also would worry about the change that Philadelphia would have to make, obviously, and this would be a massive win for the Saints than rather a huge win for Kellen Moore, if that makes sense. So, yeah, we'll have to wait on that announcement officially, right? Because we can't do it right now, or the Saints can't do it right now. But it feels like we're getting closer to every opportunity, every opening being filled by some potential candidates. So we'll keep an eye out on that. But moving over from New Orleans, Louisiana, we're going to go over to Jacksonville, Florida, where Liam Cohen, we know, is the new head coach there, and he talked pretty passionately, I would say, about the offense and especially Trevor Lawrence and his plans for both of those aspects of the team in 2025. So we're going to discuss what Liam Cohen said at his press conference and just basically going over some of the things that he should target in doing in his first year. So don't go anywhere. You're listening to the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
We're back here on the show now, and we're not moving too far off of all the head coaching talk because we're going over to Jacksonville, Florida. And by now, I'm sure everyone's seen a bit of the Jaguars' introductory press conference for Liam Cohen as their new head coach. The good and the bad. We're not here to talk about the bad. The Duval chant. Oh, God. It makes me laugh every time I think about it. Dude, that was so bad. It's so funny, but it makes my skin crawl. If you guys haven't seen it, Liam Cohen, just type it in anywhere. Liam Cohen Duval. Obviously, most of you have seen it. It's just so funny. It makes me laugh every time I even think about it. But we're not here to talk about that. We're here to talk about Liam Cohen seriously in terms of his goals for Jacksonville in 2025. Liam Cohen comes in with an impressive track record, all in all, a bit scattered, through a bunch of different places, but offensively coming from the Sean McVay tree and having success most recently last year with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. People are excited about what he could bring offensively to this team, and especially Trevor Lawrence, because it didn't take long for a question to be asked about Trevor Lawrence in his introductory press conference, and that's obviously, I would say, the biggest thing that you have to kind of get under wraps in his new job, because Trevor Lawrence is the franchise there, obviously, right? They paid him a boatload of money now, so he is the Jacksonville Jaguars for that aspect of things, and they brought in Liam Cohen because of his success with another number one overall pick at quarterback in Baker Mayfield, and we saw how their relationship blossomed in a very short time, and from how impressive Baker was to bring him to the level that we saw this past season is very impressive, honestly. So Liam Cohen is very well versed in that aspect. So a question was asked about Trevor Lawrence and, just the overall sense coming from Liam Cohen on how he plans to address the offense and also Trevor in that respect. And he said the following statement. He said, "How do we make Trevor Lawrence and this offense as dynamic and explosive as we can be? We've got to build it around him as well. We've got to make every part of this about improvement, and he will be a part of that process. He's earned that right. I cannot respect his toughness and mentality and work ethic more than I already do from afar. This will be all about Trevor right now." And pretty direct quote there from Liam Cohen, and that's what I was hoping for, and also, quite frankly, what I was expecting to hear from him, because you got a guy in Trevor, again, that is the franchise there, basically, for the Jacksonville Jaguars, and coming out of college, he's one of those guys that was thrown up there, classified up there with like Peyton Manning coming out or Andrew Luck coming out of college, that level of quarterback. And he's, to this point in his career, it's really not been close to that at all, close to what those guys experienced, because he's already suffered multiple injuries, to his shoulder, to he got that head injury, obviously, this year as well. So he's been pretty beat up. He's had to withstand a bunch of sacks. The offensive line hasn't been great down there. He's going to be on his third head coach now, and he's played a career low 10 games this past season. So it's been a very, very rough go at it, to be quite honest with you, for Trevor Lawrence here in Jacksonville. Apart from that 1 year where they had that crazy comeback in the playoffs, obviously, on the Chargers, right? That was until now, that was the peak of everything Trevor Lawrence. And it's not an indictment on him, right? I'm not saying he's the reason why, he peaked so early and now he's like a bum or something like that, right? But I think as an organization, as a team overall, that unfortunately feels like the greatest thing that we've seen so far from Trevor Lawrence, when we know he's capable of producing so much more because of his talent and his skill set and his just natural ability. He is capable of doing so much more, and hopefully now with Liam Cohen that they're able to kind of unlock that with Trevor. But it's going to take some rebuilding. It's going to take some multiple reps with Trevor, with Liam, putting in extra hours to not only get a sense of a relationship going between the both of them, but also building Trevor Lawrence back up in terms of confidence and knowledge of Liam Cohen's system, right? He's had to learn a bunch of new systems already, so he's going to have to learn another one now, and to really nail that in and get that all under wraps, I think is only the first step, right? Because then you got to go through training camp and learning new things about it, and throughout the season you grow and change and things like that, obviously, but the first initial steps of this are going to be very significant to how they play everything out. Like Liam Cohen said, right? He wants Trevor Lawrence to be a part of this building process, right? And building this team and this offense, right? And he said they've got to make every part about improvement, and that he wants to include Trevor Lawrence in that. So it seems like Liam Cohen has a good grasp on what his responsibilities are and how valuable Trevor Lawrence is, obviously. So that's good. That's as expected, like I said before. But they're just lacking that stability, especially on offense, right? And the defense, is still kind of like hit or miss, but offensively, it just feels like they're almost there. They kind of get something going a little bit, but then you don't know if you're going to get it next week. And they're very fortunate to have drafted a guy like Brian Thomas Jr. He was spectacular for them this year. And again, if it weren't for Malik Neighbors, and I said this at the beginning when they were both coming out, I said that if Brian Thomas was on any other team and he was putting up those numbers or playing like he did at LSU just on his own, he would have been like, it would have been like Marvin Harrison, Malik Neighbors, and then like Brian Thomas right there with both of them. I think he's that good, and it certainly showed this year with how much of the offense, he was, being responsible for with the production and the targets he was getting. He became their go-to guy already as a rookie. And it was a quiet rookie season for him because, again, the Jaguars weren't that great. But if you really watch them and you watch a good amount of their games, you could tell that number 7 stood out every single week. So they got a good thing going in him. And I think Liam Cohen, all in all, is the right guy to bring in because he just came from helping Baker Mayfield, like I said, and their offense was already good the year before Liam Cohen with Dave Canales, right, where they also made the playoffs. But not only were they good, but then when Liam Cohen comes in, they get even better, which is the greatest thing, right? And Baker Mayfield had career highs in completion percentage, passing yards, passing touchdowns, and passer rating. He got that much better, right? A career year for him as well. And the offense as a whole became the 4th highest scoring offense in the NFL, averaging around 29 points per game and averaging almost 400 yards per game as the number 3 offense in the NFL overall, right? So he also did say that he was going to be calling plays again, right? If that was any doubt from anybody, Liam Cohen is going to be calling the plays. It's not going to be anybody else, but adding to guys like Brian Thomas Jr., emphasizing them in this offense. Evan Ingram is also solid, right? He had Cade Otton, and I thought he made Cade Otton look, I don't like saying a lot better than what people think of him, right? Because I don't want to throw like a dig at him, but like Cade Otton for a certain portion of time during the season was playing very, very good, and he was the go-to guy for Baker. And I believe you can do a lot of the same stuff with Evan Ingram. Same thing with Brian Thomas, right? He could be your Chris Godwin, or he could be your Mike Evans in a sense that he's your number one, but they have kind of different play styles. I think Brian Thomas is a lot more shiftier and a lot more smooth with it, and Mike Evans is a big-bodied receiver, also obviously very savvy and things like that, but it feels like two different play styles, right? And coming from a system where you have two running backs as well, where you had Bucky Irving, Rashad White, and I'm forgetting the Bucs' third running back's name, but he had three running backs in Tampa Bay, and now over here in Jacksonville, you got a similar thing going with Travis Etienne and Tank Bigsby. So how much can you get out of them as well, right? Tank Bigsby looked to have a better year this year. Travis Etienne, though, on the other hand, kind of regressed, it seems. So how do you get those guys playing at the same level? Not one guy having a better year and the other guy regressing, but having them like right around here in terms of contribution to this team. That'll be something else that I'll have to work on. Fixes. I think the Jaguars will be in a very good spot, and it's exciting almost in a way because, I mentioned all these things that they have to get better at, but it's exciting because if you think about it, like Liam Cohen now has the opportunity to build and acquire all the pieces that he wants, and if he does that, and if they're successful with it from the help of their owner and their general manager, right, it's exciting because he's building what he feels is going to be a great offense, and in that respect, when you have a guy like that and you trust him, then you can trust that this offense that he's building is going to render some of the results that you were hoping for. So, overall, I think he's the right guy. Again, I want to say that. And it's weird that he hasn't, stayed anywhere very long. That's one of the things that's brought up with him, right? He's moved around to different places, but it could be different now because he's a head coach, right? He's not an assistant. But that is something that people pointed out, and I just wanted to kind of give a quick thought on it. But he's got a lot to work on, obviously, on this team personnel-wise, but also has to work on that Duval chant as well. Oh, God. I don't want to see that again. Every time I think about it, it just makes my skin crawl. I can't watch it. I either burst out laughing or it feels so uncomfortable. But maybe that'll be great. Maybe the coaches that have a bad introductory press conference are the ones that succeed. You look at Dan Campbell, Nick Sirianni also didn't have the strongest first press conference, so maybe that's the secret ingredient to it all, right? Just humbling yourself the first time you're out there, and then nobody really has any major expectations for you, and you can work comfortably. Maybe that's what it is all along, but we'll have to wait to see the results. But for right now, we're going to move to our last segment, and finishing off this heavy head coaching episode, we're going to grade all the head coaching hires so far in the NFL. There's 6 of them that I gave a grade to, obviously holding out for the Saints, but we're going to grade the Cowboys, the Jaguars, the Bears, the Jets, all those guys, and just kind of give my reasoning behind it when we return after this quick break. Thank you guys for joining me here on the last segment of today's show. And like I mentioned before we went to that quick break, we're going to be giving out some grades for these head coaching hires so far through the NFL. It's gone pretty quickly, quite honestly, so we already have almost all the positions filled out other than the Saints, and we got a good idea of who that's going to be, obviously, like we talked about before. So we're just going to go through each team grade, right? These grades are for the team, who they hired, how they went about it, and just my thoughts on them hiring this specific coach and just going through that for all 6 teams. So the first one that we have on here before we say goodbye to Liam Cohen is the New England Patriots. The New England Patriots get a A- from me. Like you guys see it there, it's the perfect match. They didn't waste any time, and they weren't shy about really showing who they wanted as their head coach. Some of the negatives about it was that it was ugly, just how they moved on from Gerard Mayo. I wasn't really a fan of. It felt like, like they were just going to move on from him anyways because they didn't want him at the end of the day. And it didn't seem fair, obviously, for Gerard, right? Because, it seemed like his performance was irrelevant, right? His production or lack thereof in maybe some people's views was irrelevant. So if you're not basing it on that, then it feels a little bit unfair. But for Mike Vrabel, the positives of this hire is that you have a relationship with Mike Vrabel. You know what you're getting in him as well, right? As a player, he was, I'm assuming, the exact same way, carrying the same principles from one of the most successful times in New England with the Patriots, carrying that over to his head coaching job now. So you anticipate a lot more of a stable, I guess, a lot more of a security, I think, around the head coaching position now, because obviously he has that experience with the Titans, and it was the most obvious move, and I thought that making this hire and how quickly they went about it was good, was proactive, and I'm a fan of that. But again, just the negative sides of how they moved on from Gerard Mayo is really the only negative thing I can say about it. Now I just hope that they give him a good amount of time to really build this team because they got a lot of things to worry about. But in terms of finding their leader, I thought they got one of the highest grades on it from me in this coaching hiring cycle. So that is the first coach we have on here, and then moving on to the second announcement from this coaching cycle, we got Ben Johnson, and not too far off, he also got an A-, or I should say the Bears got an A- for hiring Ben Johnson, because you not only got the top guy, but you got the top guy for Caleb Williams. Caleb Williams went on the St. Brown Brothers podcast, and you could tell right away that he wanted Ben Johnson to be the head coach, right? He felt like he could give him the best opportunity to grow and develop from an offensive perspective, the great mind that Ben Johnson has for the offensive side of the ball and how they could grow and help Caleb get to that next level. I think the Bears going after, a guy like that and hiring Ben Johnson at the end of the day was good to see, because a lot of fans and a lot of people probably felt like the Bears were gonna sell and not go after Ben Johnson, right, as the top guy. They were going to have this obscure candidate that they were just going to hire, and it would have felt like another team that we're going to talk about. But I liked the fact that they went after one of the top guys and that they hired a very successful and sought-after offensive coordinator that now becomes their head coach. And they already got a good amount of pieces there. So pairing Caleb, Rome Odunze, DeAndre Swift, DJ Moore already with Ben Johnson, that really got me to giving this hire for the Chicago Bears an A-. I thought pairing that up with Ben Johnson seemed too obvious to pass up. So I'm excited once again for the Chicago Bears. I was probably too excited at the beginning of this season because of Matt Eberflus. I should have taken that more into account, but now I think I can have a legitimate excitement around the Bears, right? I'm not a fan of them, but I just think that seeing them kind of bring all these pieces together and hopefully having it work out for them with Ben Johnson, I think that's going to be super exciting to watch, especially in that division. Like, all those games are going to be awesome. So, again, if the Bears are actually good, and I'm holding out hope for Ben Johnson, but he gets an A- from me. Then the next coach that was hired was his very close friend, his coworker, former coworker now, Aaron Glenn. And the Jets hired Aaron Glenn, and to me, again, these are grades for the organization. And for the organization, I'm giving them a B. And I love Aaron Glenn. I think Aaron Glenn in New York is going to be awesome. It's a great fit. But there are still a lot of questions. And it's not like the Bears where they have a bunch of guys there. And it felt like it was quite obvious that a lot of these losses for the Bears this past season, right? You look at the loss in Detroit, the loss to, I'm forgetting now. Was it I forget who it was. Was it the Packers? I think it was the Packers. It was the Packers when they settled for that field goal and they ended up missing it. Those are just two examples, but it felt like with the Bears that a lot of the problems, and based on how the players also responded after one of their last games, that they felt and everybody else could tell that the coaching and some of the decisions were pretty obvious on the coach and on the guys that make the decisions. Keenan Allen basically said it in one of his post-game interviews. So with them, to make that hire of Ben Johnson, that's why he got a little bit of a higher grade. But with the Jets, a lot of it is on the personnel. A lot of it is on the quarterback and the offensive line still being pretty spotty, and the defense kind of disappointing towards the end of the year. So the personnel around them and the organization as well being so dysfunctional over the last few years gives them a lower grade because they still got a lot of questions to answer. But in terms of just Aaron Glenn, bringing in a former player, someone that cares about the organization, you could tell right away from his introductory press conference that I loved watching how he was very intentful, very direct, and he wasn't going to shy away from some of these topics, some of these questions. And if he didn't want to answer a question, he was going to let you know about it too, right? He wasn't going to let any reporter or any media member kind of bait him into an answer. He was very blunt about that, right? And I think that's the attitude that the Jets sort of need now to get everything under control there, right? Get their act together, basically. And I think Aaron Glenn is the perfect guy to do so because you can tell he really cares about it. So I'm excited to watch. I think it's a great opportunity for Aaron Glenn, and I'm hoping he can turn things around there in New York. And then after Aaron Glenn, we had the news of Pete Carroll, and he gets a slightly lower grade because I think he, again, is a good fit for them with the experience, with the kind of culture builder that he is, and the kind of, just enhancement of everything around their organization. I think Pete Carroll can bring that to the Las Vegas Raiders that just kind of felt that they were just floating and just kind of like existing for right now. It just felt like you never expected much from the Raiders. Like they were just a team that was just going to play any game, and it never felt like there was more to hope for the Raiders is what I'm getting at, right? Despite a big win, a losing streak that was just awful, it didn't matter, right? They were sort of irrelevant in that sense. But I think Pete Carroll can come in and really turn things around there with all of his experience. Like I said, he's a winner, right? He won the national championship and also has won a Super Bowl. Not a lot of people can say they've done that. And he has a lot of continuity, and he's seen a lot, obviously, from his time in Seattle and transitioning from a top-tier defense to kind of rebuilding that team once the Legion of Boom and Russell Wilson era was over. So I think bringing that expertise and that experience and just his knowledge overall is going to be great for the Raiders. So the Raiders bringing him in was great. It's still a B, but in terms of, the long term, right, he is a little bit older. So how much is he going to be able to change? Maybe not in like a 10-year period like some of these other coaches could be there, right? He could probably be here for like 4 maybe, and then is it going to be stable enough for the Raiders to continue that on? That's my only, gripe I guess I have with it, but overall I thought this was a very responsible hire for the Raiders, right? To get things under control as soon as possible, but it didn't get the grade that I gave Liam Cohen. Again, a little bit higher for a lot of the reasons that I gave a B to Aaron Glenn. I like Liam Cohen. I like that he's a good fit for this. I think he's a good fit for this because of the fact that you have Trevor Lawrence and his prior success with Baker Mayfield and whatnot and things like that. But, of course, there comes a lot of doubts, a little bit more doubts with Liam Cohen than I would say like Pete Carroll or like Aaron Glenn, because Liam Cohen, he's bounced around to different places and he's never been a head coach before. So there is that, and that could, be a little bit uneasy for some people, but I'm hopeful for his high level of football IQ in terms of offense and how to run an offense and have a successful one. He just had a top 5 offense with the Buccaneers last season. I think that could do a lot of good in Jacksonville. And they need a guy offensive-minded, much like Ben Johnson with Caleb Williams. In that respect, right? You need someone like that to help unlock the potential of Trevor. And once you do that, it unlocks everything for that team. You look at Cliff Kingsbury and Jaden Daniels, right? That relationship flourished, and Jaden, on top of his own personal merit, having a coach like that, offensive-minded, that can help you, I think it's hard to replace that. So I think Liam can certainly be that in Jacksonville for the Jaguars. So they got to be from me. A solid hire overall in my eyes. But then, of course, we got the last one, the ever-famous Dallas Cowboys, Brian Schottenheimer. It gets a C, C minus actually, because not only is he a first-time head coach, but again, it's just disappointing a little bit, right? They went with the familiar, the safe option, and a lot of coaching experience as an assistant, but it's different when you're the head guy, right? Dealing with all that pressure, all the media that the Cowboys get, knowing that you're the guy that's supposed to be leading this ship. And I don't want to pile too much on him, but it's more so a grade for the Cowboys. Not so much Brian, because, no one's going to say no to this opportunity, right? But as the Cowboys, I felt like they kept it too close. I feel like a teacher that has gotten back all of these assignments from my students, and I just graded all of them. And this last student gave me a 2-page paper when the requirement was 3 pages, right? It was a 3-page paper, and the Cowboys gave me 2 pages and 2.5 pages and just the sources listed on the rest of the second page, right? It just felt like they did the bare minimum. It's like, all right, you kind of did half the assignment, but you obviously didn't really try that hard. You didn't do anything that really stood out, and this is the Cowboys we're talking about, right? America's team. I thought there was a higher standard to be held upon when you're labeled as that, but I guess apparently not, and it just doesn't give me as much excitement or as much hope that there is going to be much change with this organization. And I say that obviously because it feels like Brian Schottenheimer is not going to have as much power to change things, change the culture, change some of the players that he wants to bring in as much as Ben Johnson or Aaron Glenn or Liam Cohen, right? It feels like all those guys are going to have a pretty big say, where I can't say the same about the Dallas Cowboys. So it's disappointing. It's just like, all right, like they got a new guy in there. It's probably going to be the same thing. So they get a C minus from me. And that is all the coaches that have made the hires so far. Those are the grades I'm giving them. Leave your thoughts and comments in the comment section, obviously, to let me know what you think of my list, or if there's something you would have done differently if you were in my position. So with that, though, that is going to be the end of today's show. I want to thank you guys, as always, for joining me on today's episode of the Chip Shot Football Podcast. And as a reminder, please remember to like, follow, and subscribe to the show, and going and checking out more content around the Chip Shot Football Podcast on YouTube. You know where to find it. GSMC Sports Network channel, the GSMC Podcast Network channel, where you can see more coverage around the NFL, breaking news, reactions, discussions, just conversation around the NFL with me, Manny Maradiaga, as your host. Thanking you guys for joining me, and I hope to see you guys all back here again tomorrow at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Time.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet, damn ain't that great.